Good morning, everyone. Joseph Maestas is here live from the hearing room. I'm joined by Commissioner Byrd and my assistant, Christopher Hall. Can you all hear me?
Yes. Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Good morning. Great to see you all. It's 9:30. And I want to welcome everyone to the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission's regular weekly meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Michael Smith is listening in, I believe, but so Judy, will you be taking the role?
Mr. Chairman, actually, I'll be sitting in again this week. Judy did two meetings in a row, so I'm doing two in a row. So I can take the role if you would like.
All right, please roll call.
Commissioner Hall.
Here.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Here.
Commissioner Fishman. Commissioner Fishman. I'll go back to him. Commissioner Maestas.
I'm here.
And Commissioner Byrd.
I'm a present.
Now let's try Commissioner Fishman again. Commissioner Fishman, are you present? Okay, so we have 4 commissioners present, which is more than a quorum. So we can go ahead with the meeting if you would like, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Russell. We go on to the Pledge of Allegiance and the State Pledge. Commissioner Byrd, do you mind leading us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I salute the flag of the state of New Mexico, the Zia symbol of perfect friendship among united cultures.
Perfect. All right, let's move on to consideration and approval of the agenda. Members of the commission, are there any changes to the agenda that's been presented?
I believe you have one, Chairman Maestas.
I do.
Yeah, on the bottom of the agenda, where is it? Item 8 to be removed.
Yes, we are still putting some needed detail on our 2022 work plan. And so I'm asking that we defer action on it today. So that would be an amendment to the agenda that I'm proposing. Are there any other amendments besides deferring action on item 15? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Byrd, second by Vice Chair Hall. Any discussion on the motion? Russell Fisk, take the roll call vote.
Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman. Is he still absent? Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
And Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
The agenda as amended is approved 4-0.
Thank you, Russell. Sarah, do we have any special guests?
No, sir, we don't have any special guests or public comments this morning, but we do have a presentation from Ameri Technologies.
Okay, then let's move on to item 6, presentation. We have a presentation from Ameri Technologies regarding block energy microgrid systems situated in Kirtland Air Force Base. Sarah, who will be presenting on behalf of Ameri?
Berga Alden.
Actually, it's going to be Gary Opedal, who's on this call as well.
Oh, thank you, Berga.
All right, Gary, please proceed.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and warm wherever you are. We are Ameri Technologies. I'm Gary Opedal, the Vice President of Emerging Technology. Did you want me to share my screen to do this?
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll do that. Let's see if this is it. Okay, yes. We at Ameri Technologies believe that when it comes to New Mexico's energy future, it's one thing to have a goal, it's quite another to have a plan. We also believe that distributed storage is the key and adds much needed resiliency to the system, both in the cities and in our rural jurisdictions. And I wanted to just show, I couldn't put forward, let me make sure that this is advancing. I couldn't put this in the look ahead materials, but this is drone footage of our project in Florida that's being commissioned as we speak. I sent ahead the Florida regulatory pilot language. The utility here, TECO, has chosen to install storage, solar, and distribution in this neighborhood at their cost in current rate base, as opposed to creating capacity with current carbon-based generation. So our ask is this commission support a pilot here in New Mexico where this technology was actually created with Sandia National Labs and the Air Force. So the rest of the slides are background, but that's the ask. You'll note that this neighborhood, this 37 homes, all have solar, they all have storage, they all have a distribution network that if the power grid goes down, they stay up. And they have renewable generation. And again, that's in current rate base. You'll notice that the houses right around there do not. Everybody pays the same rate, but these houses have the advantage of renewable and resilient. Ameri Technologies is a $32 billion in assets utility holdco, which has assets mostly along the eastern seaboard. So resiliency is a big deal. And what started this project, Ameri also owns the New Mexico Gas Company. Just a little bit about Block Energy. What we do is we treat this just like we would. I'm an old Intel guy. I started up the Intel plants here in New Mexico. And what we do is we just create a system that integrates with the seamlessly with the existing power grid. But in new neighborhoods, we would install this in lieu of status quo. And you see an outset there of a single home. Each home has its own solar and each home has its own storage, enough storage to run that home for many hours or days. And all of that is in front of the meter owned by the utility. I want to stress that. This is not a hodgepodge of things that's not part of the system and that the system can't control. The utility purchases all of this and adds it to its own assets and puts it into current rates. And it's a simple Lego type approach. And what you do is you just tie many of these together at grid edge, and it's totally optimized. And again, integrates currently right into the utility grid. As a matter of fact, it can provide voltage, VAR, and reactive power support back to the grid as necessary. And if the grid is has too much energy, it can just send it to these myriad batteries. Again, this is all owned by the utility, so that's easy for them to do. I want to remind us is what was happening last year at this time. A lot of people know about what happened in Texas. It actually hit us too, if we remember. And our project at Kirtland Air Force Base that lost power, they were running extension cords to our system during that time. We have a vast array of energy resources in our state, and what we're trying to do is work with and collaboration in and working seamlessly at implementing at grid edge at first in new neighborhoods where that makes sense and there's no stranded assets. This will also be very valuable to rural and tribal areas where energy is not as reliable and resilient, and eventually will make sense economically to even be retrofit. Just a quick history. We started this idea in 2018 and 2019. We worked with the Air Force and Sandia National Labs to develop this technology. And in 2022, we've installed our version 2.0. That block box there, which is outside of every home, is about the size of an air conditioning coil, about 3 foot by 3 foot by 4 foot high, but it has all of the power electronics, all of the storage, and all of the really important smarts to integrate this as a system in the homes. And now we're commissioning with Lennar, one of the largest home builders in the country, in Florida. We also have a project with affordable housing in Maryland with Pepco Exelon. This is just a view of the information that you get out of our system, which is really good for efficiencies. We can show exactly where issues are in the system. They turn yellow and then red. But remember, every home is like your cell phone. You can unplug it from the main power system. It'll just keep operating until it just wants to be plugged back in eventually. And so that's the beauty of this. And this is why the Air Force loves it, is the resiliency aspect. And as a matter of fact, we've gotten $5 million appropriated through the National Defense Authorization Act to actually expand this program at Kirtland Air Force Base. We're in the process of contracting to do that. I also want to mention that we have been working with Sandia National Labs, National Renewable Energy Labs, Oak Ridge, and 2 other national labs on the cyber part of this. If you're going to have a smart distribution system, then you ought to be thinking about cyber right from the start. And we have a very interesting cyber. We get cyber assessed all the time by our friends at Sandia and their red team. And we have an optimization mode. If there's a threat, we go to control mode, which cuts out all outside information and communication. And if there's still a perceived threat, we go into safe mode. Safe mode has no communications. It's just done with voltage. So everything works. It just doesn't work in optimization. That's a big deal in our new world of cyber threats. So again, what we're here, and I'm sorry for going so quickly, just wanted to make sure that I had some time for questions, but the ask is we'd like to work with utilities, co-ops, munis in the state to look at implementing these at grid edge in support of the grid. And we would just like the commission to support a pilot here by allowing cost recovery for a pilot in New Mexico.
So, Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Hall.
So I've got a couple of questions. I wanted to ask, Mr. Opendahl, this is very impressive. And I heard you say the assets go into rate base. Which assets particularly are acquired? The entire wiring in the house, the solar units, or could you just go through those facts with me? I'm very interested in that part.
Yes, ma'am. So, Commissioner, everything is owned by the utilities. So the way that we do that is the block box sits outside of the house on the utility side of the meter. The solar feeds directly into that box and sits on top of the roof. And just like the meter is attached to the house, the solar is owned by the utility. This is a way for utilities to step into DERs. You know, it's easy to predict the future. Keep a keen eye on the inevitable. The inevitable is we're going to have solar, especially in New Mexico. And if you're going to have distributed solar, you ought to have distributed storage and distributed smarts to go along with it. This whole system is owned by the utility.
Okay,
and we are now at a crossroads where the technology is cheap enough where you can put it into current rates. The capital expense up front is more, but again, there's no fuel cost and much less maintenance cost. And this can be worked on by energy techs as opposed to linemen.
So when the project is conceived, it's at that time where the partnership occurs with the utility, and the utility's investment in all the energy components, I guess, all the electricity components of the project are identified then, and that's how you quantify their capital investment?
Yes, ma'am. It's not apparent necessarily in the regulatory paperwork that I sent ahead, but What TICO did was they proved to the Florida Commission that they could put it into current rates based on the levelized cost of energy over 25 years. Again, the upfront equipment cost is more, but there's no fuel costs.
Okay, and so the model involves some upfront approval by the regulatory commission for those capital asset investments.
That's right. And that the utility can get cost recovery for those assets, just like they would if they were going for a new peaker plant.
So, do you anticipate then, excuse me, well, I understand you anticipate a really sophisticated and immediate opportunity for control of these home located systems. And could you just explain again, you said if you turn it off, so if the homeowner doesn't want to use this system, they have the option to do that as well?
No, this is the installed system. They pay their normal utility bill through their meter, just like they would, just like any other customer would. All of this is on the utility side of the meter, and so this is their delivery system. Unlike a system where you've got individual homeowners buying solar, trying to buy storage, not being able to use it in an outage, all of those items. This is actually owned by the utility, maintained by the utility. The homeowner doesn't have the upfront capital costs, and this is just the way they receive electricity.
And so, so far in New Mexico is your only project the one at the Air Force Base, or?
Yes, ma'am. We would love to see a pilot here with one of our IOUs or munis or co-ops. So far, we've not worked that out. We are hoping that the commission we just want to raise awareness that the commission be supportive. Again, we think that this is one of the ways that we can get to our state's goals for energy, and having the utilities actually play in it and have the return on capital that they desire while implementing the right thing for the state. This is what they've done in Florida and now Maryland, and other projects not yet announced in other states.
You know, I also, I've noticed in Colorado, sort of near the airport or south of the airport there, I saw big developments go up with solar panels on rooftops. Are those systems that have this kind of interconnection and pre-planning with the utility, or are they just homes with individual solar systems to be run by the homeowners?
That's the Holy Cross development I think you're referring to. And I believe that those are using the same control system we are, but that pilot is with the homeowner. In other words, it's on the homeowner side of the meter, as opposed to on the utility side of the meter, which we think makes for an easier system and one that the system can tolerate. If you look at California and Texas and some of the things that have gone on, if we just put solar on rooftops, it doesn't always turn out well. There's unintended consequences if it's not integrated into the system properly. And the storage means that time of use issues go away. You don't have the duck curve. We literally store at the distributed site every day and then utilize it at night. And you don't have the issue of people with solar giving a local utility power in the middle of the afternoon when they don't want it, and then asking for it back when the sun's not up. Without storage, that means that they're using carbon-based generation to provide that back.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the implications, what are the implications for the aggregation of solar generation if there's excess solar generation? I guess in these circumstances, there wouldn't be excess, there wouldn't be excess solar generation. It would just all be stored. That's what you're saying, rather than aggregated for, say, sale into a market somewhere. Or is that possible too, but would that be conducted by the utility or another aggregator?
The utility would do it. The other aggregators could be a possibility depending on the situation, whether it's a co-op or an IOU. We're doing that right now in the base. The base benefits, we put more solar than the loads the homes there use. And so every day the base benefits from extra energy that goes to the base that they don't have to buy elsewhere. So that just goes right on the grid. There's an interface. If you look at the interface to the grid, which is represented by the tower there, that interface is seamless. And so if the utility wants energy from the grid, from the microgrid, they take it. And if they have extra energy, they can give it and charge the batteries at various times of the day when that makes sense. So there would be times when energy is very expensive on the grid that they could ask for it from the solar production.
So let's see. So you partnered with P&M on the project on the Air Force Base?
P&M is not involved with the Air Force Base. The Air Force Base gets its power from WAPA.
They have, that's right. That's right. So have you approached utilities in New Mexico yet with this idea?
Yes, ma'am. I would never get in the way of any relationship with a utility or a co-op with the commission. But we are in discussions with P&M specifically and with a couple of the co-ops and several tribes.
Great. Well, thank you very much for this. It's really very, very interesting. And I wonder, what do you see in the short-term future for the need for new housing in New Mexico?
This would be implemented as we are in other states, mostly where new housing goes up. One might say, well, the growth in New Mexico is not that much. There are thousands of new homes being built every year. And this makes sense from a cost recovery standpoint. If a utility were to come to the commission and say, it's a little bit different cost recovery, we get it, it's higher cost up front, but we believe this is the right thing to do long term. And as technology like your cell phone continues to go down in price, storage, solar, and power electronics will all continue to go down in price, as opposed to current status quo, which will continue to go up in price, especially carbon-based if we end up doing other things with carbon-based generation. And so therefore, this is the right way to go. Would you support cost recovery for this? I think that's what the ask is, right? But we would love to implement a pilot here to show the efficacy of this, and therefore see if this is the right thing for New Mexico widely. Once those costs continue to go down and we start seeing rural areas, imagine 14 homes at the end of a 20-mile conductor. And the transformers are 35 years old. Instead of every technology goes through, at first we try to get to the place where we can buy it new and make that choice versus status quo. Then it makes sense to use it for repair and for replacement where we have issues. Then eventually it makes sense to retrofit. We're on that curve. Right now we're on the curve where new housing. So this will mainly go in the Rio Grande Valley where new homes are being built. But eventually, as prices continue to come down and it's implemented and the pilot shows the efficacy, we could then go to rural areas where energy is not as reliable and resilient as it is in the cities. And it would make sense to implement it there.
Say,
what about, excuse me, I'm
Please,
almost finished here.
Please mute your microphones, please.
When you mentioned retrofit, I was thinking, are there opportunities for retrofit currently, given that, there's a tax credit for, investing in a solar system for homeowners, and a lot of people are putting up solar systems on their homes without having the option of having the utility on the system and having it just managed that way. What are the opportunities? You mentioned with price reduction, one could move into the rural areas, but what about in currently in urban areas. Is there a retrofit opportunity yet? And it seems
There is.
there ought to be.
There is if resilience or political will is in place, but economically, it does not make sense. Remember, this makes sense as a system. We're all of the solar and all of the storage is shared in this neighborhood. I don't have to go over engineer each house, which is what's currently happening, to try to provide power to each house. I'm using the rule of aggregation here to minimize the storage and the solar, because if everybody's at one house and not at another, then that solar and storage just goes to that one house, right? We use aggregation just like utilities have been doing for 100 years. The rule of aggregation in a given neighborhood. So it makes sense in neighborhoods. But retrofit is exactly what we're doing for the military, because resiliency is a big deal to them. They can't afford for the power to go off if an adversary or weather event takes down the grid. And so for them, it's worth it now. And they will pay for implementing this on top of the current AC system. But for economically, unless there was some political will and some dollars for this, and maybe if some version of Build Back Better gets installed, maybe we can start doing that. But right now, it makes sense for new neighborhoods. Eventually, it will make sense for rural and retrofit.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate this, learning about this. And Mr. Chair, I'll yield to anybody else who wants to ask questions.
All right, any questions from other commissioners? Any at all?
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Byrd.
thank you. I just want to real quick. Oh, he's not there again. Commissioner Fishman had logged in. Well, his name is still on there.
No, I'm here.
He's here. Okay, I just want to make for the record you are here. I saw that you had logged in earlier. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Gary. This is pretty cool. Of course, disappointed that it has to go in new neighborhoods, newly built homes. But with economy of scale, I'm sure that in a few years, we'll be able to put this on older homes. You know, it just takes a little while for everything to grow into that. And that was one of the questions, that how binding is the contract? So as you buy one of these homes, you don't own a big portion of the assets on the property. How does that work for the homeowners?
I understand this is a huge paradigm shift and not one that's easily absorbed in a couple of minutes. But you don't own the meter on your house. You don't own the transformer in your yard. You don't own any of those assets now. You would not own those in the future. And the good side of that, and I have a daughter who lived in Hawaii who was constantly calling me when her inverter went down. You don't have the upfront cost of this system, and you don't have the maintenance of this system. This is all owned by your utility. The difference is you get renewable energy, and if the power goes out on the grid, your house stays lit. And so you get those benefits, and you don't have the hassles of the ownership and maintenance of these things that are outside of your house.
And I just want to go back early on in Commissioner Hall's questions. You made the statement, I'll give you the opportunity to correct it. You said there's no fuel charge, no maintenance. No maintenance probably wasn't what you intended to say. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yes, sir. You're right. I did not mean to say no maintenance. I said much less maintenance, and it's not done by linemen. It is low voltage DC technology. It's cookie cutter, and it's easy to maintain. The batteries will last, 15 years. They're easily replaced, and so these are items that are much easier to maintain than a coal-fired plant or a gas-based peaker plant.
Thank you. I just want to give you that opportunity to make
Thank
sure
you
we
for that.
correct that statement. Because just FYI, I install solar pumps for water wells. Very small system, very simple compared to what you have here. But I realize that even though the maintenance is less on those than say a traditional windmill, there is still maintenance. So I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the time.
And
Thank you,
as
Commissioner
as you
Berg.
see from here, any component that starts to fail, we'll know ahead of time and will turn yellow and red, and you'll have hours or days to go and address it because everybody's running off a battery.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
I've got one follow-up question. Does the utility who's investing in this type of system get to take advantage of the production tax credits?
Yes.
I see. So they'll get a tax credit for their investment. And
One of,
I guess-
one of the ways that makes the economics work to put it into current rates, into current
Okay.
rate base.
All right. Okay, thanks.
This is Joe Maestas, Gary. So in your pilot in Tampa, did they actually seek to recover their costs for that installation?
Commissioner Maestas, as a fellow engineer, I know you'll appreciate this. Yes, they did. That's exactly what they did. And this pilot is to prove that the cost recovery works, the levelized cost of energy works, to put it into current rates.
And I guess as a follow-up to Vice Chair Hall's question, my understanding on the tax credits that that an installation that includes battery storage can also be included in the tax credit, provided it's paired with the solar element of it. Are there any limitations to that in terms of the maximum storage that can fall under the tax credit? Did you encounter any kind of constraints or limitations on that?
Thank you for that question. I'm going to go way into the weeds here. Those of you who've studied this will know this. There is one provision that you're exactly right. The whole system can go for the tax credits. And then in the Build Back Better version, which will come out later this summer, which is the energy only portion, there will be a microgrid, a tax credit in addition. But the one constraint, and this was one of those unintended consequences of trying to set this up to protect the ratepayer, is they don't want any of the storage to ever accept an electron that was produced by a carbon-based generation as opposed to a solar-based generation. So you would have to be very careful in reversing the energy into this microgrid and charging the batteries with AC current energy that was produced by a carbon-produced generation. And so right now we have a check valve there until we can figure that part out. But yes, you're right. There's that one constraint to be able to have the whole thing. And in addition to the solar, the storage, power electronics, all of it is subject to the tax credit.
Thank you, Gary. Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
So does that mean then that the other attributes of battery storage cannot be used for grid smoothing purposes? Because if that's true, that's unfortunate. That's quite a loss of the value of that technology, not only to just consumers, but to the utility itself. And maybe you know more than I do, but I heard that there was some effort to change that particular language in the federal laws to permit that kind of use of batteries.
There is, but in the meanwhile, we do have a workaround, Commissioner Hall, and so we just have to be aware of it and be very careful of it. We can install other assets that help with the smoothing and grid support by this very important microgrid that's at the grid edge, right? And integration, it just becomes more of an engineering task. You have to think about, DC metering, AC metering, and how those interplay, and make sure that we don't have stray electrons. And so it's an engineering problem that we can work around. It would be much easier if that language was modified.
Okay. I don't suppose you care to, well, I'd be interested to know how that workaround works, but that might go beyond the scope of our talk today, I guess.
It's just extra expense to track every electron moving around the system and make sure that we don't charge the batteries that we're taking the tax credit on. You don't have to take tax credit on all the batteries. And so we have a workaround that works in everyone's interest. It's just more expensive. It will further reduce the cost if that language were changed.
Okay. All right.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall. Any other questions? Gary, is there any possibility, maybe you can follow up and send us maybe a short abstract on the Tampa experience with respect to cost recovery, since that is the main ask. And obviously as regulators, that's, one of the top concerns, in my mind.
Yeah, if it were up to me, Commissioner, I would love to have a sit down with the people who actually sharpened their pencils and did the economic analysis. I don't know if that's possible. There are rules around that, but I'll make sure that we make any public data available, and whichever way delivery system you'd like, or discussion.
Thank you, Gary. Fascinating stuff. And I want to thank you and your team for presenting this information to our commission. And I want to thank you for staying within the time limits. And you're welcome back anytime, Gary. And hopefully we can have that follow-up to discuss the Tampa experience with respect to cost recovery.
Thank you very much. Stay safe, everyone.
All right. Thank you. All right, let's go ahead and move on to consideration and approval of prior meeting minutes. Members of the commission, you have the minutes of the January 12th, 2022 open meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Hall. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Byrd. Any discussion on the motion? Russell, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Basenti Aguilar,
Aye.
and Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
Minutes of January 12th, 2022 are approved 5-0.
Thank you. Let's move on to the consent agenda. There were no changes to the consent agenda when we approved the overall agenda. I'm going to ask for a motion and a second to approve before the reading of the consent. So do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Hall. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Byrd. Mr. Russell Fisk, do you mind reading the captions of the consent agenda items?
Not at all, Mr. Chairman. The first consent agenda item is docket number 22-00005-TR-R in the matter of the application of Air Interfacility Transport LLC, DBA AIT Ambulance for a change to its tariff. The second item is docket number 22-00006-TR-M in the matter of the application of RKC Investment Group, LLC, DBA RKC Private Ride and Charter for a certificate to provide limousine service. The third consent agenda item under utility matters is an undocketed matter titled in the matter of the application of Vesta Solutions, Inc. for a certificate of registration to provide competitive local exchange telecommunications service within the state of New Mexico. And
Thank you, Russell. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Any discussion on the motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented? Russell, take the roll call vote.
Commissioner Basenti Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
and Commissioner Fishman.
Aye.
The consent action item agenda, the consent agenda items, excuse me, are approved unanimously by a vote of 5-0.
Thank you, Russell. Let's move on to regular action items. Our next item is in the matter of case 18-383-UT. In the matter of the filing of advice notice number 69 by Socorro Electric Cooperative, Inc. Socorro Electric Cooperative, Inc. is the applicant. Judy Amer.
Yes, can you hear me, Mr. Chair, members of the commission?
Yes.
This matter it has had a very long history, and it's been at least 2 years since the commission has considered this matter. So I feel like we need to go over the history in order for all to understand exactly where we are in this long litigated case. This matter comes before you today on the New Mexico Supreme Court's recent January 26, 2022 order granting stay of proceedings. That order stayed, there are two appeals. There's a mandamus proceeding, appeal number SC 38302 brought by SEC against the commission. And it also stayed the appeal in SC 37948, another appeal brought by SEC against the commission. And the order granted the joint motion of SEC and the PRC to remand jurisdiction back to the commission to consider modification or withdrawal of a June 2020 compliance order. And it stayed the appeal of the compliance order. So the proposed order, which I'll get to later, essentially asks for updated information on positions and factual information that have occurred since over the past 2 years, since the commission issued the final order on September 11th in 2019. This entire matter started with a rate case filed by SEC on December 3rd, 2018, which asked for a rate increase. And the reason that SEC stated it wanted a rate increase was to increase cash margins to meet the board's financial goals. This case went to hearing. The city of Socorro, New Mexico Institute of Mining and Technology, and Donald Steinhardt, a residential member and customer, all were interveners and attended the hearing, which was held in June of 2019. On August of 2019, hearing examiner Glick issued a recommended decision, which denied SEC's proposed revenue requirement of $25.9 million and recommended no revenue increase. The hearing examiner's RD did recommend SEC reallocating how its unchanged revenue was divided among the classes to gradually move the rate of return from each class, so there's less subsidizations and more unity. To that end, the recommended decision basically decreased revenues from the large commercial service class, which would benefit one of the interveners, Tech, and also fixed lighting rates, which would help the city, and also recommended that the commission adopt an economic development rate, which was something the city wanted. On September 11th, 2019, as I stated, the commission adopted the final, the recommended decision in its entirety. After that, SEC filed motions for clarification. On October 9th, 2019, the commission entered an order stating that there was no clarification needed of the RD or the final order. 2 days later, on October 11th, 2019, SEC filed a notice of appeal and simultaneously filed a motion to stay with the commission, requesting the commission stay the final order pending a decision by the Supreme Court. And on October 30th, 2019, the commission denied the motion to stay and found that the final order should remain in effect and should be implemented because SEC's revenue was going to remain the same. Tech, if the final order wasn't implemented, Tech would not receive the benefit of the decrease in electric bills as a result of the 1.9% decrease in large commercial rate and the economic development rate. And the city would not receive the new cost-based LED rates and implementation of the economic development rate. After that, the city and Tech, intervened in the appeal, and that nothing really happened except for between then, that was in October of 2019. Nothing happened until April 3rd, 2020, when the city and Tech and the PRC utility division staff filed a verified motion to compel the commission and asking the commission to compel SEC to implement the final order. In their pleadings, both the city and Tech and staff stated that SEC had not received a stay from the commission and had not received a stay from the Supreme Court, but had not implemented the final order. We're proceeding as if it had a stay. On April 15th, 2020, the commission granted the joint motion to compel and issued what's been called by the Supreme Court the compliance order to SEC and these are the pertinent provisions of the compliance order, which was to immediately implement the final order. It imposed fines in the amount of $1,000 per day for, at that time, it was 185 days that SEC had not implemented the final order. Plus, it imposed $1,000 a day for continuing violations after 185 days until the date of compliance. The compliance order ordered the fines would be paid by the Board of Trustees personally and not borne by the members of SEC because, as it's well known, electric co-ops are owned by the members, and it was the Board of Trustees who voted to not comply with the order, the final order. And lastly, and importantly, it held all the fines in abeyance for 60 days and stated that no fines were due or payable as long as SEC complied with the commission's final order and implemented it by June 15th, 2020. So the commission gave essentially a carrot to SEC to comply with the final order and stated that no fines would be due or payable as long as they complied. Shortly after, on May 8th, 2020, SEC filed an emergency writ of mandamus and motion to stay in another Supreme Court docket, 38302. asking the court to grant a stay of the proceedings, grant the writ, stay the enforcement of the final order and the compliance order. Then the next important fact is on May 29th, 2020, the Commission and SEC, after discussions between the Commission and SEC that were authorized by the Commission, filed a joint motion to temporarily stay the emergency writ, stay the appeal of the compliance order, and remand. The Commission and SEC both agreed that they wanted the compliance order, just the compliance order, to come back to the Commission to potentially revise or withdraw the compliance order that imposed fines against the trustees individually. So that was in May of 29th of 2020, and the Supreme Court did not rule on that joint motion until January 26, 2022, which, as I stated at the outset, the Supreme Court did issue an order temporarily staying the emergency writ filed in 38302 and staying the appeal in 37948. So the proposed order states that since it's been almost 2 years since the Commission issued the compliance order on April 15th, 2020, and the joint motion on May 29th, 2020, the Commission needs the parties to update their current positions regarding the final order and inform the Commission of any negotiations that may have occurred since then. So I have a list of 11 questions that I propose the Commission ask, and certainly any can be modified or added to. But question number 1 is to be asked of SEC Tech and the city: do you support or oppose the final order presently and state the reasons? Do you support or oppose the compliance order and state the reasons? Is SEC intending to comply with the final order? And if so, when? And if not, why not? Are your positions identical to the positions stated in your briefs filed in 38302 and 37948? This case has been briefed at the Supreme Court. And if not, what position has changed and in what manner? Next, what rates have been charged by SEC and or paid by Tech and the city since the date of the final order? Is SEC currently in compliance with the final order? And if not, what reasons? Should the compliance order be revised or withdrawn? What revisions should be made to the compliance order? Have the parties been in negotiations since the compliance order? If so, what areas of agreement or disagreement remain amongst the parties? What proposed resolution of this matter is desired to be able to file a joint stipulated motion of dismissal of all the New Mexico Supreme Court appeals, and asking SEC to submit its audited financial statements for 2019, 2020, and 2021. They would need to answer those questions by February 16th, which again, that's only 1 week and we could extend that. Then no later than February 23rd, 2022, Utility Division staff shall file a reply to SEC's text and the city's responses filed on February 16th, 2022, addressing each party's answer to each question. Staff shall also review SEC's 2020 annual report that was filed with the NMPRC and analyze trends or areas of concern. And I stand for questions.
Judy, there's another version of an order with some track changes. Did you want to address that and tell us the nature of that second version?
That I just added a few questions, and I just read all the questions, including the added ones. One of the added questions was SEC submitting its audited financial statements for 2019, 2020, and 2021, which was something that came to my attention that would be helpful for the commission to have. And that also it came to my attention that SEC had filed a 2020 annual report, and that I propose in the order for staff to review it and analyze the trends and the areas of concern, because we've never received any feedback from staff on SEC's 2020 annual report. So those were the additions, and I did read that right now.
Okay, thanks for that presentation, Judy. I mean, this has been quite a litigious case, and my hope going forward is that we really try and encourage more alternative dispute resolution techniques to allow the parties at the outset of a case, or at least early on in the case, to come to some agreement. And certainly, as a sitting commissioner, you know, I don't like hearing about a prolonged lack of compliance, you know, with our orders, but this has been pending since 2018, and my hope is that we can resolve this to the satisfaction of all parties involved. So with that, I'm going to open up any questions for Judy. Any commissioners have any questions for Judy on the draft order? And Judy, if I don't know if you feel we should go into executive session, because I have some thoughts and some ideas about the fines that have been levied. But I do feel like perhaps this is our last effort to gather the right information to make a sound decision regarding this case. So I'll just put that out there. What are the wishes of the commission?
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, oh, go ahead.
Commissioner Byrd and then Vice Chair Hall.
Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor had mentioned on the date on the response, February 16th. And I would like to ask for another 7 days. After 4 years, I don't think 7 more days is going to grossly change the outcome. However, it does give them a little bit more time to maybe be a little more thorough and thoughtful on the responses. And I think that's always a good thing. You know, we've always asked for a little more time when we need to study something. And I know they probably already have their answers canned, but I would like to ask for an extension on those responses by a week on each.
Commissioner Byrd, certainly we can do that. And regarding executive session, this is litigation, and if the commission so desires, we can go into executive session at this time.
Any other commissioners have any questions? I think this, you know, this order is just, you know, entails additional fact finding. So I don't see anything controversial about it, but I would say if we engage in a discussion regarding fines and potential modifications to the compliance order, I would suggest that we refrain from that and go into executive session.
Mr. Chair, I guess.
Yes, Vice Chair Hall and then Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, I guess my only comment would be that we should wait and see what the parties bring to us in terms of their positions and what they've been doing. We're sort of fact poor at this juncture if anything else has occurred that we're not aware of. So it might be more efficient for us to just wait and see what happens. We can always have an executive session once we know more.
Thank you, Vice Chair Holland. And before I forget, Judy, let's make sure to change the dates regarding the utility division staff reply to SEC's responses. Since we've added a week to SEC's deadline to respond, we should do the same regarding division staff's deadline to reply.
Yes, I will move the first date to February 23rd and the second date to March 1st. Or second, whatever is 2 weeks.
Thank you. Commissioner Fishman, welcome.
Yeah, sorry to be tardy. I agree with Commissioner Hall. Let's wait for a little more information. And that might make executive session more productive. And I just wanted to comment that to me, this particular docket has serious implications because if the commission fails to assert its authority, consumers out there are losing an important protection that the commission was intended to provide. So I don't think we've done a great job of that so far in this case. I know other commissioners may disagree, but I think it's really important, however we resolve this, that it be clear what the commission authority is and that co-ops respect that. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Any other comments? So far, we have a proposed order with some amendments regarding deadlines for responses and replies to the responses. Are there any other potential amendments that any commissioner would like to offer? And Judy, at some point, I'm wondering if there is a way we can try and diffuse this situation when we get these responses to see if we can't come up with some kind of a satisfactory resolution. I realize it's probably too late to, engage in alternative dispute resolution, but perhaps we can think about any other ways we can settle this case once we get the information that we're requesting in this proposed order.
Yes, I'll definitely keep that in mind when reading the responses. And, one of the questions is whether or not the parties have been in negotiations. So maybe we can get some, and what areas of agreement or disagreement remain. So perhaps we may get some information from those questions and answers.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
I think one thing the commission can do is to reread the recommended decision and maybe the testimony in the case. I mean, there was sharp division between the complainants and the responding board of the Socorro Electric Co-op. And I thought this was a noteworthy case because of the sheer number of complainants compared to the usual number of complainants that complain about high rates. I'd be surprised, but pleasantly so, I suppose, if the parties have been able to do some negotiation and reach a better outcome on their own. But I think that would be one thing we can do, is just to revisit the facts that have occurred so far and make sure we have a good understanding of them, because this was a very highly participated in complaint about excess rates.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall. And I realize, typically we rely on the parties to voluntarily gather and try and come to some compromise. But going forward, I'd like this commission to consider more tools in our toolbox regarding alternative dispute resolution techniques. In fact, by statute, we're mandated to employ those techniques to stave off or reduce or eliminate or avoid protracted litigation. We have mediation, binding arbitration, stipulated agreements, but I think we should be more proactive in our rules of procedure to utilize mediation and even binding arbitration to settle cases like this. So hopefully we'll have an ongoing dialogue regarding that. I'd like to see it institutionalized into our way of doing business and our rules and procedures. So with that, do I hear a motion to approve the order as amended? And if we need to go through the amendments again, we can.
So
Do I hear a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Hall. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Fishman. Any discussion on the motion? All right, Mr. Russell Fisk, please take the roll call vote.
Chairman? Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
and Commissioner Hall.
aye.
The motion to approve the order as amended passes 5-0.
Thank you, Russell. Let's move on to our next action item regarding case 21-159-UT in the matter of an inquiry into New Mexico Electric Utility Resource Adequacy Planning for summer 2021 readiness in the matter of a commission inquiry into the impacts of a global supply chain disruptions on utilities and provision of services to ratepayers. And what we'll be discussing is a potential order regarding consolidation of these dockets, followed by a discussion regarding a proposed plan for inquiry into peak season readiness of electric utilities and potential impacts of supply chain problems and other factors. I guess, Hans, why don't we start with the order, if you want to maybe go through your memo, and then we can open up the discussion. I think the consolidation of dockets is a fairly straightforward step, but the real issue is going to be discussing the scope of our planned inquiry into peak season readiness. So with that, Hans, if you don't mind, do you mind teeing this up?
Not at all. Thank you, Chairman Maestas. The proposed order before the commission would consolidate the two prior inquiries of the commission regarding 2021 summer readiness, which was docket 21-259, and global supply chain disruptions, which was 21-260 UT, into a single docket for consolidation, and recaptions the inquiry from the prior labels into basically what I have called the matter of an inquiry into New Mexico Electric Utility Resource Adequacy Planning and impacts of global supply chain disruptions for peak season readiness. And this would prepare the commission to review the upcoming 2022 summer peak season readiness of New Mexico's electric utility companies. As you probably can recall, last year on June 23rd, 2021, the commission issued a notice of inquiry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought there was a question. Sorry.
Please mute your microphones other than Hans. Thank you.
The previous docket last year regarding the adequacy of resources of utility companies that may have been adversely affected by the pending FERC case, and gained responses from companies regarding their plans to provide reliable electrical service. Similarly, on October 27, 2021, the commission had issued an initial order opening the inquiry in docket 21-260 to review potential impacts of the global supply chain disruptions and how those might impact the utility companies. There's been discussion regarding current planning, which will segue into our next item here, to file an order regarding the readiness of utility companies for the upcoming peak season of summer 2022. This has been somewhat heightened by, there have been media reports that PNM has indicated rolling brownouts may be required to offset demand in the summer months. And as we will get into, rather than opening yet another additional inquiry regarding 2022 for efficiency of the docket, the proposed order then consolidates the two previous inquiries and recaptions it so that the commission can best address any peak season readiness that may come about for this season and or next season based upon the commission's desires. With that, I'll stand for any questions.
Any questions for Hans? And again, the subject of this is the proposed order to consolidate those two dockets. I just want to say that I think the Public Regulation Commission has been very proactive in seeking more information about the scope and potential consequences of these global supply chain issues. Obviously, the red flag was last summer when the Public Service Company of New Mexico formally notified this agency that supply chain issues could potentially delay renewable energy replacement power projects for San Juan Generating Station. And so I think our rationale was, well, if it's affecting PNM, surely it's affecting the other investor-owned utilities and electric co-ops. And that was the genesis and the reason for early on opening a docket to get that kind of information, again, on the scope and potential consequences of supply chain issues. And it wasn't surprising, but it's affecting everyone in the electric industry. And I'm very concerned about the impact on electric co-ops as well. So I think this was a proactive step to get a handle on these global supply chain issues. And so I think this is a good step to consolidate these dockets because I see that the supply chain issues are another complicating related factor to resource readiness, especially summer readiness. And so I support this consolidation of these dockets. So with that, let me just open it up. Any comments by commissioners? Any comments at all? And again, yes, Vice Chair Hall.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say I too support the consolidation of these inquiries. I advocated for it, and I think it's the right thing to do. But I think I mentioned before, but I want to mention it again. I don't think our emphasis should be just on peak season readiness. I think with the more erratic weather and wildfire events and cold weather events that we're seeing. I think that vulnerability exists even outside the traditional summer peak timeframe. And we'd probably be better off not limiting the scope of this inquiry into to peak season readiness, but rather just have it all season readiness or some other phraseology. But in general, I think utilities have to be prepared for adverse weather or adverse consequences resulting from drought, such as wildfires, at any time in the year. So that would be one comment I would make. And otherwise, I agree that our commission has been very timely in trying to address these issues. And I know I've been aware that kind of in the same time frame that we've been establishing our dockets last year, other state commissions have been doing the same thing. And certainly supply chain issues have arisen from pandemic problems that have deeply impaired the workforce. And I'm aware that that was recognized as a problem nationwide by commissions. So I think that we're doing right by consolidating these dockets, and I think it bears commenting that even if we weren't taking the aggressive and proactive steps that we are taking, that wouldn't relieve utilities from their obligation to serve. And that's going to be difficult with sometimes with the changing climate that we have. But nevertheless, I feel that it's good for us to carry out these dockets because I think it provides some assistance to utilities in keeping focused on these issues and driving them to search harder for solutions. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall. Before I move on, the proposed caption of the consolidated docket is as follows: in the matter of an inquiry into New Mexico electric utility resource adequacy planning and impacts of global supply chain disruptions for peak season readiness. So what if we just dropped for peak season readiness on that new caption? Would that
would be fine. That would be fine.
Hans, did you note that?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chairman Massis. I can gladly change the order to reflect that change.
So is utility resource adequacy planning enough? Is it implied that that also applies to readiness?
I believe so,
okay.
Mr. Chair. I think that's implicit in what resource planning is.
Okay, so we have an amendment to the new caption, the new docket. Any other commissioners have any comments on the consolidation of these two dockets?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar and then Commissioner Fishman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I would like to also ask questions about the supply chain challenges. Is it only in New Mexico? Have we looked at other states, the neighboring states of New Mexico or across the nation? Hans, do you have any idea where, if the problem exists throughout the country?
Well, I think based on the responses that we received, I mean, this is throughout the country. You know, some of the responses have been quite alarming, especially from co-ops. Some, most have indicated a lack of extra transformers, which, as you know, we have extreme weather events where we have unscheduled interruptions. And they're saying that this is going to be a challenge going forward, lacking transformers and other badly needed equipment. Some co-ops have indicated that they may not even be in a position to offer new service. So I think this situation is quite dire. I really feel that we need to be innovative in perhaps looking at neighboring states and seeing perhaps how we can partner together to share surplus equipment like transformers to help alleviate any prolonged service interruptions. So and all indications are, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, that supply chain issues and delays associated with it are going to persist all the way into 2023. And so I think it's incumbent upon this commission to see if we can't reach out with all the stakeholders, in addition to our elected representatives in the legislature and in Congress, to seek solutions to carry us through this very, very difficult period.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you,
Mr.
Commissioner.
Chairman.
Mr. Chair.
Hold on. Go ahead, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
I think the citizens of New Mexico would like to learn more about it. If we can have the facts on the record, that is what I'm seeking this morning from our General Counsel's office. I think if there's problems that are existing as far as a supply chain for resources that needs to be replaced, such as renewable energy, I think the citizens of New Mexico are very interested. And I'm one citizen that I would like to say that if there's other states, neighboring states, or other utility companies across the country, if they are experiencing similar problems, let's put it on the record. That's my point, Mr. Chairman. Secondly, I would like to ask if it's possible, what if we consolidate these dockets? What is our goal? We need to set our goals in place. We have to have that strategic plan. And when you have that strategic plan, you need the facts behind it. So that is the reason why I'm asking, is it only New Mexico that is experiencing this problem? And I think that's what we are here for, to answer these questions. I'm assuming it's coming from our citizens. They need clarification. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Commissioner Fishman and then Vice Chair Hall.
Yeah, I just wanted to move the order.
All right, we have a motion on the floor. Do I hear a second?
With the amendment, by the way.
Second.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Fishman, a second by Vice Chair Hall regarding the amended order that includes a slight change to the new caption for the consolidated docket. Any discussion on the motion? Russell Fisk? Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to, I suppose this is discussion on the motion, but I wanted to comment on Commissioner Vicente Aguilar's question about are other states affected? I believe this is a topic of conversation nationwide, and I'm just looking at the agenda for the NARA, National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, for their upcoming Winter Policy Summit next week. And on, I forget, I don't know which day this is. I think it's Monday. The Electricity Committee has a topic of discussion or a presentation called Keeping Up with Climate. How can we work together to prevent blackouts in the face of extreme weather? That's just one of the numerous topics of discussion among all the committees. But I think that's a title that indicates that this is a subject of national importance that's affecting states all across the country. How to prevent blackouts in the face of extreme weather. And, you know, oh, there's more details. States are responsible for, it says, among many other things, states are responsible for resource adequacy, assessing near and long-term risks, and approving cost recovery of reasonable utility investments. From lessons learned from recent blackouts and the NERC-FERC joint report on Storm Uri, this panel will address recommendations for state and federal coordination and forward-looking actionable steps states can take. So I think it's most certainly a nationwide issue. And we, like all the other states, are having to guide utilities as well as we can. So that's all I wanted to say, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor to approve the potential order regarding consolidation with a slight amendment. Commissioner Byrd, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and I want to just keep going with what Commissioner Hall and helping making sure that the information is getting put out on resource adequacy. The Southwest Power Pool is also dealing with how do we make sure that all our assets across the footprint of the Southwest Power Pool is up and running and facing the shortages, just like in the grocery stores. It's funny what doesn't show up. I mentioned this before when we opened this docket. Certain things just all of a sudden aren't there that were there last week. I had mentioned at the time wood sucker rods, and it was almost 7 months before they showed up again. Finally, 2 weeks ago, we started getting wood sucker rods. But taking solar panels, which is more direct to what we're dealing with, you can't just replace a solar panel with any other solar panel. They've got to be matched in wattage and voltage. So the ones you need are probably the ones you can't get a hold of. And so you're facing those issues. Luckily with the streaming technologies we have now, we can communicate faster across larger footprints. Even on Facebook, there's a page called Water Well Guys where we can talk to each other. Hey, where can I find something I need? And the utility companies are dealing with the same thing, but absolutely, this is a nationwide, which turns into a worldwide issue. We have empty containers ready to be shipped back to be filled with materials, built materials in other countries. But we can't get them out because the ships are full of stuff that we can't get unloaded. And so it's just one thing builds on another, but absolutely worldwide problem with the way that we are receiving materials, and it changes every day. You can go to the grocery store every week and see different things on the aisle that aren't there now. And that's not just limited to food products. It's everything in the global supply chain.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Any further discussion? Russell Fisk, please record the vote.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Hall.
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar.
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman.
Aye. Aye.
Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
And Commissioner Byrd.
The chair, aye.
The motion to adopt the order as amended passes unanimously 5-0.
Thank you, Russell. So the next part of this agenda item is going to be interesting. It's a discussion regarding the proposed plan for inquiry into peak season readiness of electric utilities and potential impacts of supply chain problems and other factors. So before we begin, and the intent is to provide some direction and information to Office of General Counsel to begin drafting an order of inquiry on this issue. And so before we start that discussion, why don't we take a 10-minute break? It's just before 11 a.m. Let's take a 10-minute break if there are no objections, and we'll reconvene at 10 after 11, 11:10. Is that okay with everyone? All right. Thank you. See you all at 11:10. All right, folks, it's 11:11. Let's go ahead and reconvene. So next on the agenda, we're still on the in the matter of an inquiry into New Mexico electric utility resource adequacy planning. So specifically, this is a discussion regarding a proposed plan for inquiry into peak season readiness of electric utilities and potential impacts of supply chain problems and other factors. Before I open up the floor to the commissioners, I do want to state that we have already begun internal discussions about this issue. We've had at least one meeting. We're going to be meeting weekly. And of course, to avoid a quorum, only 2 commissioners are a part of these discussions, but and that's Vice Chair Hall and myself, in addition to appropriate staff. So we're taking this situation very, very seriously. And I think that we are, as I said before, regarding supply chain issues and resource adequacy, we're trying to be proactive and seeking to find solutions to avoid blackouts, brownouts. And so I think it's incumbent upon all parties involved to work cooperatively. I don't think that litigating this issue in the court of public opinion is going to be productive. And I think everyone needs to recognize the framework that we're in right now. We have landmark legislation in the Energy Transition Act that calls for very aggressive renewable portfolio standards that is going to guide our state toward a transition to having carbon-free energy by investor-owned utilities by 2045 and rural electric co-ops by 2050. There have been previous commission actions regarding replacement power for San Juan Generating Station. I think that we have been, as an agency, receiving mixed messages about the current state of resource adequacy. And I think mixed messages through active presentations to this commission, mixed messages through commission filings, whether it's the integrated resource plan or a 3137 filing that pertains to the filing of the latest load and resource tables. And so I think it's time for us to really get to work and solve this problem and avoid unnecessarily alarming the citizens of the state. So with that being said, I want to lay out the process that we're engaged in right now. Hans is the lead in gathering potential questions for an inquiry that would go into this order. We've received feedback from Vice Chair Hall's office and other potential questions from Office of General Counsel. And so what I'm asking other commissioners is to, and you need not describe potential questions that you'd like included in this meeting. You can submit them in writing. But what Hans will do is compile all recommended questions that would be within the scope of this inquiry, compare it against responses already received that are related to this issue, and then draft a final order for consideration by this commission, an inquiry order. So with that, that is the task at hand. So I'd like to open up the floor to commissioners that have any recommended questions or inquiries that could potentially be included in this potential order. Anyone?
Mr. Chair,
Vice Chair Hall.
Well, I'm not clear. I thought you just wanted us to send you our proposed questions, so that's what I did. Do you want us to, you don't want us to go through all the questions now, do you?
No, but I think, look, we all saw headlines in the Albuquerque Journal.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed in that, because I firmly believe that this agency is being proactive in addressing this. And I think this agency needs to respond, but respond with productive, proactive actions in coordination with all stakeholders. And I'm committed to that, at least as chair of this commission. But I think it's incumbent upon every commissioner to decide how we want to go about solving this. Certainly, within the confines of our own authority in terms of what we can do. There's other folks involved in this. And so Commissioner Hall, if you'd like to summarize the nature of your recommended questions of inquiry, then I'd say go ahead. Let us know kind of what your general concerns are, but there's definitely no need to go through in detail every question that you've submitted. So with that, go ahead.
Sure. I'm glad to do that. One thing that I think is important to know about our utilities is what opportunities they have through in the way they acquire their resources, say by participation in a regional organized trading market of some sort, what opportunities they may have to augment their resources that they have. So one thing I strove to inquire about was what are the other options other that utilities do have through being members in organizations of other utilities that are founded on the proposition that utilities can join together to provide support for each other across a broader footprint in the event that a utility in one area of that footprint has some extreme weather that is not impacting utilities farther away in the footprint. And so therefore the ones farther away still have adequate resources and can share those resources on an emergency basis or just a temporary basis with the utility that needs that type of resource immediately because they're running short, having to deal with a crisis. So the thrust of my questions to the utilities was to inquire deeply into what sort of relationships they had and how are they taking advantage of them, and explain in detail the types of benefits they can receive and what challenges they expect to be able to surmount through those kinds of agreements. And there are a number of trading or sharing agreement organizations in the Western Interconnect. And so that was what I was trying to inquire into, is what other resources are available besides the ones that we typically see in a load and resource table that's submitted by a utility that shows the extent of the resources that are owned by the utility. That doesn't give you the full picture. So that's what I was, that was the main thrust of many of my questions. Let's see, there might have been, I had a very few questions about supply chain issues, but I think I expected your office to have a lot more supply chain questions. So I just focused on this main area here for resource adequacy in the West and who's sharing with whom and how effective is it? And if it's not satisfactory, what are the utilities doing otherwise. So that's what I was doing. That's kind of the thrust of my questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall, and I want to thank you for taking the lead in being the first to submit very detailed questions that would be considered as a part of this inquiry. Thank you for that. Any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yes. In light of the information being out there, at least from P&M, that they're concerned about needing to do rolling blackouts, and their latest loads and resources table shows negative 3% reserves. They're short against peak. We've got a number of months ahead before we're going to face the peak summer situation. And it seems to me that there should be a communications plan, and I haven't read through all the appendices of what P&M submitted to us as far as an information update. I just got through the main body of it. But it seems to me there needs to be a very clear communication plan for customers, getting them ready for the summer season, not waiting to communicate the day before an emergency, but kind of an ongoing information campaign to let folks know what steps they can take coming into the summer to reduce their peak usage. And hopefully in that process, reduce or eliminate the need for any kind of drastic measures like rolling blackouts. So anyway, I will probably submit a bunch of questions around that, but I don't think it's something that you wait to the last minute to communicate. I'd like to see something where, if that truly is the situation we face, that communication plan starts well ahead of potential June, July blackouts. So I'm done.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. And I guess since you brought that issue up, as I mentioned at the outset, I wasn't on this commission when the replacement power case was settled. A case that, or at least a replacement power portfolio that did not include any combustion resources. That particular case was not appealed. And fast forward to summer of last year, I was on this commission, and as you recall, commissioners, P&M notified us that certain replacement power projects would be delayed as a result of supply chain issues. And in that course of that discussion, the question was asked, is there a need to extend the operation of San Juan Generating Station in light of this development regarding replacement power projects? And the answer was a definitive no. And as I recall, we were assured that any additional power would be purchased on the open market, but P&M was reluctant to have any discussion on that and tip their hat for fear of falling prey to price gouging on the open market, which I can understand. And at that time, they projected a reserve margin of 5%. And so those are the kinds of mixed messages I think that we're trying to reconcile, and that how did things go further south since last summer? How is it that the integrated resource plan really doesn't show any new combustible resources? How is it that we just received a new load and resource table that shows a negative 3.4% for reserve margin for summer of 2022 and a projected reserve margin of 3.46%. It's in the positive territory for 2023. So I think we should include 2023 in the scope of this inquiry, not just 2022. Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah, just following on to your comments. I do think this is a rapidly changing situation. And so it doesn't surprise me that the information 2 or 3 months on changes, particularly into the most recent loads and resources table. So I just want to be sure that we're not blaming PNM for things that are out of their control. And I would hope that PNM wouldn't blame the commission for things that are unknowable, were out of their control, out of our control. And that we're just focused on being sure that we keep the lights on through the summer. Because blaming doesn't solve much. Solving stuff does solve stuff. And so let's just, I hope that all parties, the commission, the utilities, all stay focused on that as we're moving through this difficult period, particularly summer 2022. I totally agree that we need to be thinking out to 2023 because the supply chain problems are somewhat unpredictable, as we've seen so far. And we need to act like this is a situation that could persist. And we should be treating it that way. In the case of PNM, we did get a lot more information in their latest responses to our bench request. So I do want to, let them know that I appreciate that. But I really do want, since on the supply side in their responses to us, they do paint a pretty dire picture about whether they'll be able to obtain resources to cover that 3% reserve shortfall. And actually, that 3% is more like a 15 to 20% shortfall when you consider typical reserve requirements. So that's a big deal. And it's going to take big deal thinking about how we can work with consumers to, be sure that consumption patterns don't put us in a rolling blackout situation. And I guess what I would encourage is that, a question that I asked in the latest bench request we sent out had to do with, are there any cost savings customers can get if they adjust their consumption patterns? And the response correctly was, gee, that's a rate case issue and we can only change rates in a rate case. Well, we're coming up to an emergency. Perhaps the commission, together with the utilities, can come up with some kind of short-term solution. We do rate riders all the time, which I don't necessarily love, but potentially maybe we can do something here that's a rate rider situation where we can work commission in conjunction with the utilities to come up with some kind of special incentive that helps consumers shift consumption patterns for the peak during the summer. So I just want to ask that everybody keep a totally open mind, be creative, consider all potential possibilities, and don't just fall back on old habits and normal operating procedure, because quite frankly, coming into summer, based on what PNM has said, we're not facing a normal operating environment. So let's not stay confined to just normal remedies.
Thank you, Commissioner Fishman. Other commissioners that wish to contribute to this inquiry? Commissioner Vicente Aguilar, do you have any comments regarding this proposed inquiry?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for the time. I think the commissioners are expressing their concerns and sharing information. That is a good thing. I'm a true supporter of getting the facts. I can understand there's a hearsay from previous meetings, or there's a hearsay of activities in New Mexico. I'm not concerned about that. What I am concerned about is that in this particular inquiry, allow our general counsel's office to get the facts, because the hearsay is not going to stand any grounds when there's a legal challenge. But if we have the facts in store, then we have, greater ability to come to some type of a resolution and maybe giving some proposals. But I am one commissioner that's going to keep my mind open. We don't have the ability to during the pandemic, that's out of our ordinary regulatory process. So during the pandemic and post-pandemic, or we're still in the midst of the pandemic, I am open to new direction. I am open to making a decision that's sort of like a different direction. So I just wanted to let you know, I don't think it's that difficult. It's common sense. We need to have the power on for 2022 and 2023, and it is our job to make the best decisions for the consumers. So I just wanted to make that remark, and that's the reason why I am seeking the facts to be put into record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. And I guess from my perspective, I'll be suggesting questions regarding compliance with the Energy Transition Act. I think the part of the ETA, or Energy Transition Act, regarding the recovery of stranded assets as an incentive to close coal plants, I think that's good for investor-owned utilities. But what's really more challenging is complying with the renewable portfolio standards. And as we all know, the 80% renewable portfolio standard applies to renewable energy. But the 100% carbon-free renewable portfolio standard is just that. It's not renewable energy, it's carbon-free resources. And so there was, the way I interpret it, in the 80% renewable portfolio standard, there's a provision for investor-owned utilities that says that whatever carbon-free resources existed, in their portfolio at the time the Energy Transition Act was signed can remain. So there is a grandfather clause that exists in the 80% renewable portfolio standard for investor-owned utilities as I read it. So carbon-free, I think, is, definitely includes nuclear. So with that, if in fact any nuclear energy that existed in any investor-owned utilities portfolio at the time the ETA was signed, why not keep it if it's grandfathered in, despite it perhaps not meeting the 80% renewable energy, renewable portfolio standards? So there's some provisions there to perhaps get around the problem of relying solely on 100% renewable energy. In the case of PNM, I think they declared early on that they're able to achieve 100% carbon-free resources 5 years before the deadline of 2045. So they said, we can do this by 2040. And so I'm trying to reconcile the current situation that we're in with that declaration to beat the deadline to have carbon-free energy. And so, you know, it's outside the realm of our authority, but if the Energy Transition Act, this landmark piece of legislation, is perhaps contributing to this situation, then perhaps it needs to be revisited. But what we're doing as an agency is implementing it. And, you know, I was a candidate for the commission, but I was closely following the two cases, the abandonment case and the replacement power case for San Juan Generating Station. And I think Commissioner Byrd recalls those cases very clearly. And what I'm trying to say is that we're implementing statutes and laws, and that is our job. But if there is an issue with the Energy Transition Act, by all means, I think maybe legislators need to engage in discussions with our agency and utility stakeholders and see if there's any way we can help alleviate this situation that's compounded by these global supply chain disruptions. And so I realize I'm kind of getting off the scope here, but these things have to be mentioned, and we have to grapple with them and put them out there. And so, anyway, any other commissioners that wish to weigh in on this? Hans, do you think you have enough? I think what you'd like is the questions in writing to you from commissioners, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Maestas. Yes, I just would encourage you, if any commissioners have any individual questions that they would like me to include, by all means, feel free to email those to my attention. I will be probably spending the majority of the afternoon today formulating those and reviewing those to see to what extent those questions have been answered previously, or how we can expand upon what has been answered in the past, incorporate those into those questions. So I would encourage, if you do have individual questions that you would like me to incorporate into the proposed order of inquiry, then by all means, feel free to reach out to me.
Is there a general timeline? What is your overall goal to bring this before the commission for action?
I mean, I think, as we've noted, it's great that we're starting this in February, because that does give us time, but I definitely feel I could have something before the commission even as early as next week.
Okay, thanks, Hans. Commissioner Byrd, you want to finish it up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to once again do a little clerical notice. We talk about the Energy Transition Act as if it's a standalone act, but it's really a subset of SB 489, which also plays a role in our decision-making. And so in the back of my mind, I'm thinking Mr. Smith is probably cringing, but not feeling like actually responding to remind us that there's a bigger bill, SB 489, that was the driver for the decisions that we were being made, that we were being forced to implement. I'll put it that way. Our job is not to create law, it's to try and implement the laws handed to us in the best manner that's favorable to not just our consumers, but also the companies. And so there's some real wrangling that goes on between us, our staff, interveners, and the utilities on ensuring that everybody's personal interests are being protected. And so are the results perfect? No, we can't change the law, so that it is what it is. But again, I just want everything that's going on is under the direction of SB 489, which contains the Energy Transition Act. And I just want to make sure that we remember that there's more to that bill than just the Energy Transition Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Without objection, I'm going to move on. Thank you for that great, robust discussion. Our next.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
I just wanted to say that, you know, this discussion has been, I think, very stimulating and thought-provoking, really, and it actually makes me think of other questions to add for the purpose of I guess, working together more with utilities, maybe inspired a little bit by Commissioner Fishman's comments. You know, what fact is we're in an energy transition, not just within our state, but well, I don't know about worldwide, definitely in some parts of the world wide. And to the extent it's not going to be a smooth transition, we shouldn't be all that surprised, because sometimes life happens, like pandemics, that can throw a spanner in what our expectations are. So I guess what I'm saying is I think we've touched on a number of topics that I hadn't really thought about much, and I might include some questions. I mean, for example, to the extent we want to work in partnership with utilities, I know one thing we could do is try to communicate with ratepayers about their consumption patterns, as Commissioner Fishman was talking about, and encourage consumers, or maybe ask the utilities to encourage consumers to, you know, be a little bit more mindful during summer months about how they use electricity. Maybe conduct, you know, a little bit of a campaign like we see being conducted elsewhere in the West and in our state as well, to conserve water. We have to conserve water. We all know that. Well, during the energy transition, we need to be mindful until we have the new tools in place to be the clean energy grid of the future. And certainly we know we're working on rules to bring those, the use of those tools into place, but they're not there yet. So in the meantime, we all have to sort of pull together. And I think it's kind of a good mindset for us to remember, so that we can hopefully inspire the community to do what they can, because they have a lot of power, really. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall. Let's go ahead and move on to item 10, subpart 6, discussion and potential action regarding recent increase in the number of access lines served by rural ILECs receiving access reduction support payments. Russell, if you don't mind, before you kick this off, if you could display the table that was created showing the trends in access lines.
I will see if I am technologically capable of that. Let's see. So you got this here. You have to open this, and then I do. I go here. Share screen. Let me see if this works. I don't have screen sharing ability. The host has disabled it. Isaac, are you? I can send this to Sarah or to Isaac. Isaac has it. The Excel. Here it is. That was quick. Thank you, whoever. Let's see. Okay. Can you read that? It's kind of small.
Can you expand that a bit?
Yes, that's better.
There you go.
Oh, the Excel. Unfortunately, the Excel columns are not wide enough for some reason. They are in the original, but if you look at line 24, where you have the totals, which is an important part for each year, we're getting those number signs. So somebody needs to expand this a little bit. Thank you. All righty, thank you. Very quick and very efficient response there. Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, would you like me to begin?
Please, Russell.
So, Commissioners, you'll recall that on February 1st, I sent the commission this Excel spreadsheet that was prepared by Telecom Bureau staff concerning this issue, which has been discussed in past open meetings. The recent increase in total access lines served by the rural ILECs, the incumbent local exchange carriers, receiving access reduction support payments from the State Rural Universal Service Fund. It affects, as you can see from the spreadsheet, it caused an increase from the payments that were made in 2021 to the rural ILECs, totaling about $16.4 million, increase to $17.8 million for this year. So that's, as you can see, that's against the trend that we've seen since 2018. You see the amounts of ARS payments have been going down every year fairly steadily, a very steady rate, 19, 18, 17, 16, due to the fact that the rural ILECs are, of course, the incumbents with a wireline in the ground, copper wires in the ground. And many people, including I'm sure many of us, have cut the cord in the past however many years and rely solely on wireless for our voice service. Now, this is separate from broadband service. These access lines are counting voice service. So we're just talking about voice service here. And as I noted in my memo, those decreases were the intended result, presumably, of the 2017 amendments to the Rural Telecommunications Act. They became effective in 2018. One of those amendments, which changed the calculation of ARS payments to include a percentage change each year for each of the rural ILECs, or an adjustment to the ARS payments for each of the rural ILECs based upon the percentage change in access lines served that they had experienced over the previous year. It's actually like for 2022, it's actually 2020 that would be the year that you'd be looking at under our rule, because the calculation for the 2022 payments is made in 2021, and the only full calendar you have is 2020. But so there's a bit of a lag, but you get the idea. So that was, I think, I wasn't part of the negotiations with regard to those amendments, but I think that was essentially a concession that the rural ILECs made in the negotiations to begin decreasing their payments, because before that they had fixed payment amounts going back to 2005. 2005 is when the Rural Telecom Act was passed, and it was when the rural ILECs were required to reduce their access charges. Those are the charges that they charged other telecom companies, usually a competitive, a CLEC, a competitive carrier, to complete a call, to do the last mile, to use their infrastructure, to give access to their infrastructure to other carriers. They made most of their money, or a huge, significant part of their revenue from that, and they were required by the legislature to decrease those to the interstate level that the FCC had set them. And then what the fund did was reimburse them immediately through the payments of ARS payments that equaled what they had lost at that time. But then that stayed in place, the same amount of payment, the same, the majority of the USF was going to the ARS recipients, and it was the same payment, 2005, 2006, 2007, right through 2017. And so you see how the language that was added by amendment, change in access lines, was intended to take into account the fact that they were already losing a lot of, in fact, that was probably the period in which, wireline companies, incumbents were losing the most. access line serve, which is access line serve is really just telephone line serve, telephone customer serve, voice customer serve. It's a proxy for that. So, the idea was that this would always come down, and it has been coming down until 2022, or like I said, specifically it would be calendar year 2020 is the year you'd be looking at for 2022 payments. So they went up, and that was obviously a surprise. I guess in past years, there have been some small increases for certain carriers, but it never resulted in a big net total increase to the IRS payments like it did for these 2022 payments. And that did, of course, cut into what was available for the broadband program in last year's application cycle. Whereas in 2020, the commission had about $13.9 million left within the $30 million statutory cap to spend on broadband program projects. Last year, because this number went up from 16.4 to 17.8, and there may have been another minor change, but mostly because of this, the commission only had about $11.5 million to award in broadband program projects. So it definitely cut into those payments in a significant way. And I don't really have a guess as to what the increases were caused by. There may have been, Mike Ripperger said informally that there may have been some expansion of voice service by these companies that are experiencing that have these large increases. Some expansion in territory, territory served within their approved territories, but it's really not clear why this trend would reverse itself now. It could be, part of it could be that the process of people moving from wireline to wireless is starting to be complete. Like everybody who's going to actually cut the cord and just have wireless for their voice service has already done so. That could be part of it too. This is speculative. So the commission could consider an inquiry into the cause of this surprising change. And in my memo, I discuss the commission's authority to do so. As I said in the memo, an inquiry, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, could I just ask a question before?
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
On the table?
Yeah, let's try and be brief.
Yeah. Russell, do I understand you to say that we have data prior to 2017 showing the numbers of access lines? I think you said this whole
well, Commissioner Hall, we may
something dated back to 2005 or something. And the reason I'm asking is because I see your point that between 2017 and 2018, and then between 2018 and 2019, we have columns here in this table that show a decrease. And then between 2019 and 2020, there is on average a small increase. It's kind of commensurate with the decrease between 2018 and 2019. But just looking at the average data on this table, I don't know if I'm convinced this is an abrupt change. Certainly, a large number of the access lines have gone up somewhat, and a few have gone up a lot, but a few have gone down a lot. So do you have data for previous years like 2016, 2015, and so forth, that would show a continual decreasing pattern? Because I'm not sure that on this data that there's a big deal happening. Although what is a big deal in my mind is that what has happened impinges on the available money in the fund to use. And my other question is this information that's going to be brought out in the audit that is being conducted? And if so, when is that result due? Because I hear you say you don't know why this is happening, and you don't have a proposal either way for us to have an inquiry or not. So I guess I'm thinking if there's more information to be looking at, maybe we should do it. And maybe the simplest thing to do would be to do a short inquiry, maybe 1 or 2 questions. Why did your figures go down, or why did your number of lines go down or up? We might find it's just a blip associated with the pandemic somehow. I don't know. But do you have data going back further that would show a more clear, a more extended decrease in the number of access lines that would more strongly suggest that the increase we're seeing now is meaningful?
Commissioner, that's a good question. I don't know if we have that data. I can refer that question to Mike Ripperger, who is, I believe, present at the meeting. Before I do that, though, I'd just like to address some of the issues you brought up, just so that we can turn it over to him and he can take over. The audits that have been recommended for audits of the use of access reduction support payments by the recipients, the rural ILECs.
Oh, yeah.
That was recommended by the commission in the report, the October 1st report to the legislature. And really the substance of the recommendation was to allow the commission to use up to $75,000, not all in 1 year, up to $75,000 to employ or contract with an independent auditing firm to audit the use of these funds. So it wouldn't be an audit of the calculation of the access lines. It wouldn't be about the amount of the payments. It wouldn't be about that calculation. It would be about whether those payments, once received, are being used to serve the purposes of universal service. And 60% of it has to be under the RTA, has to be supporting broadband service. So that audit wouldn't, and there is no audit pending because we're awaiting the success or failure of the bill that was introduced by Representative Figueroa that would implement those recommendations. So the audit's not happening yet. We're waiting for the legislature, and when it does happen, it won't address this issue. I feel like there was another question I wanted to answer, but let me turn it over to, one thing I wanted to clarify is that, like I said, the numbers you see for in line 23, or line 24, those years that you see reflected are the years of that total amount of payment. In other words, in 2022, this year, $17.8 million is to be paid over the course of the year to the rural ILECs. But like I said, that's based on a lag. That's based on calendar year, the change in the percentage change in access lines served by these rural ILECs in 2020, because the commission, under our rule, the commission sets the size of the fund, including the size of the ARS payments in late 2021, prospectively for 2022. So the full calendar year of data that's available is 2020. Now, that's just what has been chosen for the rule, like calendar year. Obviously you could do a different sort of year, but that's a lag that you see. So that might explain some of the reason why these numbers may not be matching up for you like you thought they would. But like the decrease in access lines for 2017, 2018, that's going to affect, well, I guess let's turn it over to Mike, because when he says 2017 to 2018, I don't know if he means 2017 calendar year or 2018. Mike, are you available to discuss
Russell,
and also the question of whether we have access line counts for prior to 2017? I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, did someone?
Russell, before we turn it over to Mike, I'd still like to allow commissioners to comment first before Mike responds. Yes, Commissioner Fishman.
Yeah. If we do an inquiry, I think it's worthwhile also to check into the accounting. Has something changed about how we account for access lines? And that might be worth looking at to see if this is a real change or a record keeping driven change in the data. So
Yes, and
That's my
Commissioner
only
Fishman, Mike might have something to say about that if that's a possibility. It wouldn't be coming from our end because the commission did amend the SRUSF rule effective at the beginning of 2021. But there weren't any changes, I believe, to the access line definition. But there could be a change happening on the side of the ILEX, how they account for them or how they count them.
So Russell, I guess consistent with Commissioner Fishman's comment, is there any way we can amend the scope of the audit? Because you just said that the audit really is focused on how the funds are expended, but can we amend the scope of the audit to address, the inventory of the access lines that are reported?
Mr. Chairman, we could do that. That is, like I said, that was the part of the commission's recommendations to the legislature as something that needed legislative action with regard to using SRUSF monies to conduct such audits. As the commission obviously has very little extra money, no extra money really in the budget for such things, but it could be, but that would be, asking, I think, perhaps the sponsor, Representative Figueroa, to amend the bill that is pending. I think it's HB 70, I want to say. To say, we have the commission has an additional recommendation or additional use potentially for that money, for the auditing money that we'd like to add in the language of the bill. So it would be legislative action. It would be changing that proposed bill.
Thank you, Russell. Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Looking through the table, I really don't see anything that goes, ooh, wow, what's going on here? It makes sense. If you take out the outliers, Penasco Valley, there's been a big boom down there. And if you've driven down there, there are boatloads of new businesses all out there. And that makes sense for them to have had all those new access lines. The one that is kind of an outlier to me is La Jicarita, which is 2 words, by the way. And somebody who's thought about it more than I have may have the right answer. Why don't we just call them and ask, hey, are those numbers right? Or did you really see that number increase? And if so, why? It's just a simple question. I think that was a good response there. The rest of them, those are in areas where the businesses are growing. You look at Lico, Valor, which other ones were big? Anyway, Penasco Valley, I get. There are so many businesses out there that was just ranch land 10 years ago. It makes total sense that they're increasing at that rate. And the rest of them are kind of keeping in pace. I think that's just the nature of business. Businesses want a landline and homeowners really don't need one anymore. So this chart doesn't throw anything out to me except for La Jicarita. That's odd, Mora County, having that number of increase. Maybe there's something going on there we're just not aware of. And a simple question and phone call down there could probably answer that question. Is that number correct? And if so, what's going on? That's great. I mean, it's not a problem, but that's my thoughts on this.
What Commissioner Byrd is saying is very true. Especially if you see an increase in businesses, you're going to see generally a larger increase in the number of lines, proportional to a new business than you would to a new residence, because a business often buys a lot of lines that it needs currently, telephone numbers that it needs currently, and to have some for the future. So that does generate a lot of new access lines, as far as I understand. So that could be a complete explanation. It certainly would be a big part of the explanation, I think.
And then Russell, I was wondering if there's any correlation, and maybe Mike can address this, a correlation in terms of the service areas where we're seeing an increase in access lines. Do they have a persistent lack of wireless telephone service and even broadband? I'm just curious if there's any correlation there.
That's a great question for Mike Ripperger.
All right, with that, Mike, do you want to go ahead and address some of these?
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I think there's about 4 or 5 different questions that've been laid out, so I'm going to try to get to them all. And if I miss any, please remind me about the item that I may have missed. To start with the audits, to confirm what Russell has said, no. Even with the audit of the administrator of the State Universal Service Fund by that auditor, he doesn't get into why access lines may have gone up or down. Simply, are they doing what they should do under the rule as the administrator, and are they managing the fund in a financially responsible manner?
And just to clarify, I'm sorry, Mike, to interrupt, but for the commission, Mike is talking about something different now. Current audits are currently done of not contributing, of the rural ILEX, or the current oversight that's done with regard to the fund administrator. That's separate from what Commissioner Hall had asked about with regard to the prospective legislation. Is that correct, Mike?
Thank you.
Yes.
That was a question in my mind. I appreciate that. So this is just a current review by the company that presents the data on these companies every year, right, Mike?
It is a company that is hired through an RFP at the commission to audit the administrator of the State Universal Service Fund to ensure that they are doing their job as they're supposed to under the rule.
Yes.
And by statute.
Okay.
And so that happens on a regular basis, and they submit reports to the commission, and the reporting does not include why access lines might be changing.
Okay.
And that's in addition to what Russell already discussed with the potential legislation about audits. To move on to the access line counts, historical access line counts, they are available. They're reported, they've been reported in dockets at the commission since the beginning of the institution of this fund in 2005 or 6. Depends how far back you want to go. It takes some rummaging around sometimes to get those numbers. And I don't know how readily available those numbers are with the administrator. They may have them more readily than I could get them through prior dockets, but it is available. With regard to the ARS support payments reported on the spreadsheet, the important figures are really 2019 through 2022, because that correlates to the access line counts where there's a 2-year lag from 2017 to 2020. In fact, 2017 may have been paid out under a different mechanism and a different reporting of access lines. But those access lines can be had. And so if need be, depending on how far back you want to go, we can probably get those. It might get tough if we start to go more than 6 or 8 years out, but they're probably available. I'm trying to think of the other questions. Oh, and with regard to why the access lines have gone up or down, and the reporting of those lines by the carriers, you can ask the carriers themselves why those have gone up and down. And you can include a question as to, is it because of A, B, or C, wireless service or broadband, or, try to get to the bottom of that. And also you might want to ask the administrator if they have seen a change in the way that carriers have reported their lines to them. It shouldn't be. I think the commission's fairly well defined what an access line is for reporting purposes for access reduction support payments, but it may not hurt to ask if they've seen anything different. I certainly don't know. I mean, I'm taking these at face value. And what were the other questions? There's another question there somewhere?
I think that was it.
I think that's it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
I would like to just flesh something out with Mike. When it comes to broadband, as I have discussed with the commission before, both the commission and the legislature have rejected requests that were made in recent years by the rural ILECs to include what they call broadband only loops as access lines. In other words, customers who request only broadband service from the wireline and get their voice service from wireless. My understanding is that these access line counts certainly wouldn't include that because we rejected that. The commission rejected that, and then the rural ILECs went to the legislature. The legislature didn't pass that bill. These access lines, they may, don't they just reflect voice service, period? I mean, the same infrastructure may carry voice service and broadband, but I think these line counts are looking at voice service customers. Is that right, Mike?
That's correct. The commission, the carriers first requested the commission include broadband only loops in a proceeding before the commission in a rulemaking. The commission rejected that. The carriers then tried to carry legislation to put that forward, and that didn't make it either. So it's not included, it's voice.
So we're really looking at trends in voice service alone,
Yes.
Not broadband.
Yes.
All right, gentlemen, let's move forward. So what is the consensus here? Is a soft inquiry in order here, or is this just not enough data to really, take that measure?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
I'd be interested in a soft inquiry. I hadn't factored in the idea of a 2-year lag, so I'd be curious. But, it could be, it could be an email or it could be a phone call or whatever. But I thought the questions that Mike Ripperger just worked through would be our questions. Maybe he and Russell could put their heads together and come up with a written down list of what they are, if they feel they need, and if they need help with us repeating our questions to them, I'm glad to do that. But I think it wouldn't hurt to just get more information. We've got this table in front of us, and we don't have quite the explanation. Although I thought Commissioner Byrd sounded quite knowledgeable about it, actually.
So
Thank you. I'll take that.
I think that's a good
Please do.
plan. That's a good plan. So Mike and Russell, you will be the co-leads in gathering potential questions. And again, I agree, there shouldn't be too many questions, but commissioners, please submit your questions. What do you think by the end of the week, Russell and Mike?
That sounds fine. You can send them to me and to Mike. My question is, though, I know there's not a motion yet. By soft inquiry, do you mean not even opening a docket? Because I would recommend, of course, as a lawyer, opening a docket, because the information you get, you may want to report to the legislature next year with regard, because, it's an interesting topic, even if it turns out not to be very interesting answer, or just a very a pleasant answer that there's more business and nothing really surprising. But I think opening a doc will be good, just to have someplace to put it officially. Plus, having a docket in general is a good idea at the commission, simply because future commissions, future staff, why not be able to find information that we file away informally? Dockets are always the best way to keep track of something.
All right, then do I hear a motion to open a docket and compile an inquiry regarding recent increases in the number of access lines served by rural ILECs receiving access reduction support payments?
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Okay, we have a motion by Vice Chair Hall. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, second by Commissioner Vicente Aguilar. Any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chair.
Just a quick question is, so.
Commissioner Fishman and then Commissioner Byrd.
Okay, I'm just interpreting a soft inquiry as something along the lines of what Commissioner Byrd mentioned. We might get a list of questions and send out a note to all the providers and perhaps to the auditor, and just ask, what's changed? What do we need to know about these numbers, and, any sub questions? Is that what we mean by a soft inquiry here?
Mr. Chair, that's what I meant. Just
I think so.
a
Okay, just
series
wanted
of
to be
short
clear that
questions.
we're on the same page.
Right.
Well, I guess in that case, I would say, probably no docket then, because we wouldn't be doing these in the form of bench request orders. So if it's that informal, then I wouldn't open a docket. Because I would open a docket to do bench request orders, official orders of the commission, single signature orders and such, asking for information, with an affidavit attached, in the responses. If it's just to, informally look into this, this question by, calling and emailing the recipients and the auditor, then I would say don't open a docket, because there wouldn't be a purpose then, except to have a place to store this information, but it wouldn't be in the sort of formal form you'd want for a docket. So either way is fine. It doesn't, I'm not pressing for a docket to be open. I'm just saying,
Mr. Chair?
All right. All right.
Mr.
Yes,
Chair?
Mr. Fishman.
Yeah, just a quick question for Michael. Michael, how would you prefer to go about it? Ripperger.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Fishman, I know we don't like to order open dockets just for the sake of opening dockets, but it is easier to sort of track what you're doing through a docket, and it's easier if they're official questions. They'd be more inclined to give you an official answer to the questions in a docket. So, we can open it, ask the questions, get the answers. If there's nothing interesting, you just shut it down. If something interesting comes up, then you've got an avenue and you've got a vehicle to pursue that. So I would prefer a docket just for housekeeping purposes, but it's at the discretion of the commission, as Russell said.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chair, I'm fine with that. I was going to say I prefer that too, because to the extent it does impact the amount of money we can spend, I think it's probably better to keep a good record.
Hey, Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because I'm totally congenial and like to get along with folks, I'm not going to vote no on this. But I think it's really self-explanatory. I mean, what else has happened in the last 2 years that would explain more landlines? Everybody's had to work from home. When you look at Mora firsthand experience, there are quite a large handful of people that live in Mora but work in Santa Fe and in Las Vegas, but your cell service is quite questionable up there. And so they had to get landlines in order to perform their job duties. I think the explanations are really self-explanatory on why this is an increase. And if we continue with the work at home model, which seems to be working pretty well, this may see the end of the decline in landlines for at least a while, but I won't oppose an open docket. I think you need to do emails, not phone calls, because if it isn't written down, it didn't happen.
Right.
So emails is a better way of tracking the information. So anyway, that it's kind of like the supply chain issue. I don't see that we're gaining any new information, but as far as a record for legislative purposes and stuff, I can see a value in that. And so I support this.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. And Mike and Russell, I'm wondering if we could also just get a spot count, since we're dealing with a 2-year lag. As an engineer, I'd like to see more data points before you can make any kind of conclusions in terms of a projection. So I think we ought to take this opportunity to get maybe a more current count of access lines, and just to see, and again, just to get another data point and see if that this is maybe a sustained trend, as Commissioner Byrd mentioned.
I think that makes sense because this is the most current information is 2020 information, and possibly we'll see that the trend has already reversed itself or gone back to the old trend.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? The motion is to open a docket and establish a soft inquiry regarding recent increase in the number of access lines served by rural ILECs. Any other discussion? If not, Russell, please take the roll call vote.
Commissioner Byrd,
Aye.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
and Commissioner Maestas.
Aye.
So the motion to open a docket for soft inquiry into this topic passes 5-0 unanimously. And we can start asking questions via a bench request to go out next week. If the commissioners would like to send me and Mike any particular questions that they have, we can work with those and our own and whatever questions we come up with ourselves, of course.
Thanks, Russell and Mike. Let's move on to the next item, discussion and potential action regarding letter to Tri-State on renewable portfolio standards compliance. We really shouldn't spend too much time on this. The letter is in the packet. But with that, I'll have Judy kick this off. Go ahead, Judy. You're on mute. Judy, are you there? Hello, Judy. Well, let me just tee this up for people that are tuning in. Tri-State reached a settlement with the Colorado Public Utility Commission regarding their electric resource plan. And they communicated this agreement and informed us that the agreement is also impacts New Mexico in that we have 11 rural electric co-ops, 11 or so, that purchase wholesale power, 95% of their wholesale power from Tri-State. Tri-State is a generation and transmission company that sells to multiple states and entities within those states. And so what this letter is trying to achieve is to establish a more ongoing dialogue with Tri-State, because as everyone knows, we do not have authority to regulate Tri-State, but we do have authority to regulate rural electric co-ops to ensure that they comply with the renewable portfolio standards in the Energy Transition Act. And so, yes, Judy, go ahead. How was I doing? Were you already going to correct me on my intro?
No, I'm so sorry. I could not unmute. And so now I'm able to join in the discussion.
Well, go ahead. The less I talk, the better. So go ahead, Judy.
Well, you were doing really well. And what I have to add is that in your packet, there is a proposed letter that Commissioner Maestas is proposing to send in response to an email that Mr. Tim Woolley, attorney for Tri-State, wrote to the commission in January. He wrote the letter informing of the settlement, which I don't know if Commissioner Maestas already said, but it was the culmination of a process initiated after Tri-State filed its first electric resource plan, ERP, with the Colorado Public Utility Commission in December of 2020. And the settlement sets forth a plan that will result in an 80% reduction in carbon emissions associated with wholesale electricity in Colorado by 2030, relative to a 2005 baseline. Essentially, the letter commends Tri-State for this settlement and supports their plan to achieve the 80% reductions in Colorado. That is consistent, but it's a little bit different standard than the requirements for and I got the number right finally. There's 11 New Mexico rural electric cooperatives that are supplied electric energy from Tri-State. Our standards, as you know, are for the rural electric cooperatives are 40% renewable energy, so not reduction in carbon emissions by January 1st, 2025, and then a 50% renewable energy by January 1st, 2030, and a target of achieving zero carbon by January 1st, 2050, with at least 80% renewable. In sum, the letter states that the PRC does look forward to partnering with Tri-State in a similar collaborative process as they undertook with the Colorado PUC, and ends with a statement that says, we would like to work with you to provide us with a New Mexico specific roadmap for how New Mexico customers of Tri-State will, meaning those 11 rural electric cooperatives, will achieve compliance with the New Mexico renewable portfolio standards. And their roadmap would be specific to New Mexico in that it would be framed in terms of percentage of renewables as opposed to percentage of reduction in greenhouse gases. And that the letter was in your packet. Commissioner Maestas' assistant sent you an update later yesterday, but I just basically paraphrased what it says. And I'm available for questions, and Commissioner Maestas, you can take it from there.
So Judy, before we discuss this letter, obviously, as a regulatory agency, we need formal assurance of compliance with the Energy Transition Act's renewable portfolio standards. And we have a more robust requirements for investor-owned utilities in that we require them to file integrated resource plans, which are long-term plans that gives us an indication how they intend to transition into having more clean energy in their portfolio. And then we require renewable portfolio standards compliance filings. So we have both. We have a long-range plan, and then we have, I think it's an annual compliance filing to assure us that they're complying with the RPS requirements in the ETA. But we don't have the long-term plan element requirement with the co-ops. Is that correct?
Yeah, we don't have rules implemented to regarding the rural electric cooperatives and their filing of any kind of plan, anything more than their yearly filing that they do. They're following the statute. We don't have a specific rule that fleshes out the statute.
So this effort to partner with Tri-State is an effort to provide that long-term planning assurance that the rural electric co-ops that purchase wholesale power from Tri-State will be in compliance. And so I know we've had some legal issues in specific cases, but I think it's in our best interest to partner with Tri-State. I applaud them for informing us of this settlement agreement with Colorado, and certainly it impacts our state. And so that's really what this letter does is to engage with Tri-State on an ongoing basis to assure us as a regulatory agency that their clients here in New Mexico are in compliance with renewable portfolio standards. So with that, I'll just open it up. Any comments or any questions or any changes to the proposed letter?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair Hall.
I don't have any changes. I thought it was very good. I have and particularly insofar as it points out the difference between us and Colorado and that we require renewable energy standards to be met rather than greenhouse gas emission reductions as specific as theirs. I mean, we do have one or two greenhouse gas emission metrics that I can think of, but it's not graduated like our RPS is graduated. But I had a question for Judy, if I could ask that.
Yes.
Judy, does Colorado have regulatory authority of any sort over tri-state that we lack?
Yes.
And how is it different?
It's been a while since I read the actual statute, but they do have authority to require ERPs from GNTs like Tri-State. And they have also promulgated a rule. And I can search that. I have that on my computer and I can send it to you. But it is, we don't have that authority.
Okay. So does that underlie our language of partnership, why we want to partner with them? Because
we don't have any specific statutory authority,
right? But
we're hoping, or the intention, I would say, of the letter, and hopefully the letter expresses it, is that they would work with us to get us the similar information that they filed with Colorado, but packaged in a form that's specific to New Mexico.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, we see a level of cooperation from Tri-State that we haven't seen in many years, of recent years. We have seen that. So hopefully that would be enough of a springboard, but I just raised that question because I'm wondering if that might be something we should try to explore, but we can talk about that elsewhere. For purposes of the letter, I think it's very well written, and I think it's very timely too. I'm glad we're doing it now.
And I would just like to clarify that the statute is being followed by New Mexico Rural Electric Cooperatives. And it says in 621534B that each year the cooperatives shall file with the Public Regulation Commission a report on its purchases and generation of renewable energy during the preceding calendar year. It shall include the cost of renewable energy resources purchased and generated by the cooperative to meet the RPS, and an explanation of steps taken to minimize costs, including competitive procurement and comparison of price of electricity from renewable energy resources bids received. In recent prices elsewhere in the Southwest United States, and an annual compliance plan for meeting the renewable portfolio standard for the following 3 years. So that currently is being done.
And that's good leverage. I mean, that's maybe all Tri-State needs to see. I'm sure they want to keep their customers. So thank you for telling me.
Yeah, that's being done by the cooperatives, the rural electrics.
Correct.
But I think they get a lot of the information from Tri-State.
Oh, yeah. Okay, well, thank you. I have nothing more, Mr. Chair.
All right, so do I hear a motion to approve the letter as presented?
So moved.
Okay, motion by Vice Chair Hall. Do I hear a second? I'll second it. Oh, second by Commissioner Byrd. Any further discussion? Russell, please take the roll call vote.
Commissioner Fishman,
Aye.
Commissioner Maestas,
Aye.
Commissioner Hall,
Aye.
Commissioner Vicente Aguilar,
Aye.
and Commissioner Byrd.
Aye.
The letter is adopted unanimously 5-0.
All right, Thank you, commissioners. Let's move on to discussion and potential action regarding legislative matters. Is this you, Mr. Wayne?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. Yes, I'll kick this off today. We do have some staff online to help go through the actual bills themselves. We have Senate Bill 147, Senate Bill 194, and Senate Bill 198 that we've added to the agenda for this week or rolled over from last week. But just procedurally, Mr. Chairman, I would note that Senate Bill 147 and Senate Bill 198 are still in the Senate Committees Committee, which means that at least as of this morning, they hadn't been ruled germane for consideration during this 30-day session. That, of course, can change at any time. But even if they are ruled germane, they still would have to go through the next two Senate committee referrals, go over to the House for at least two referrals, and then pass the House. So there are 8 days left in the current legislative session, as the commission is well aware, because we've done this for a long time. Anything can happen in those 8 days, and bills that seem stuck can get unstuck, or bills that are moving can get stuck. So we're tracking these carefully, and happy to answer any questions that the commission has on them as you go through them this afternoon.
Hey, Wayne, I guess in light of that development that they still haven't been deemed germane, do you still feel that it's beneficial for us to discuss them?
Mr. Chairman, in all honesty, I think it's always beneficial when you discuss them, but this will probably be your last time to do so, because next Wednesday is a day before the end of the session. I hate to make predictions and say these bills aren't going to have action taken on them during this session, but I do think the fact that they are where they're at is somewhat telling at this point. So sorry to not give you a yes or no answer, but I don't think they necessarily need to spend hours on each of them. I'd put it that way.
All right, then let's proceed.
And I think in particular, Mr. Chairman, if you wanted to discuss one, it would be Senate Bill 198. I don't think Senate Bill 147 is likely to see further action during this session. That's the one I feel most comfortable making a prediction on.
Okay. Is there a desire to describe it? I'm going to have to rely on the commissioners to kind of read the attached fiscal impact reports, not just from our agency, but the consolidated FIR from Legislative Finance Committee. So is there any comments on SB 147? All right, let's move on to SB 194, relating to electric utilities, amending definitions in the Rural Electric Cooperative Act and the Renewable Energy Act. Yes, Wayne.
I'm sorry, I was blanking on the status of Senate Bill 194. Senate Bill 194 has actually been tabled, so I'm not sure that one is of particular need for a lot of discussion on that one either, since it has been tabled. It was tabled either yesterday or the day before.
Okay, great. I know why. I have my own theory about why it was tabled. So let's move on to SB 198. Now, I certainly have an interest in discussing this. So I'm not going to read the cap. Would you like me to read the caption, Commissioner Byrd? No. Okay. SB 198, commissioners. Any comments on this?
Personally, Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Fishman?
Personally, I'm neutral on this. I think this is the long-term direction the legislature wants to go. I know a lot of folks in the agency would like to keep it in where it is. But I think the legislature really wants to get the PRC focused on traditional utility functions. So anyway, I'm fine either way, but I wouldn't necessarily support or oppose this bill.
Commissioner. Commissioner Byrd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I do oppose this. There was a reason why this portion of transportation was put under the PRC's purview. And in the new bill, they're not really addressing how that's going to be taken care of. They're just wanting to move it away. And so again, I agree with Commissioner Fishman. This is what they're wanting to do is try to focus the PRC into one zone. But just like with many of the other divisions that were removed, it didn't improve service, which should be their goal. If you're going to change things, then let's make sure it's a positive change for the people in New Mexico. And I don't see that this is trying to accomplish that. They're just trying to remove it from the Public Regulation Commission's purview. And so I oppose that.
Thank you, Commissioner Byrd. Any other commissioners have any comments on this? I spent 23 years working with Federal Highway Administration, and under U.S. Department of Transportation, the Federal Motor Carrier Agency was under U.S. DOT, but after 9/11, I believe they moved the Federal Motor Carrier into Homeland Security. And the state of New Mexico, their Department of Public Safety, as I understand, also includes the state motor carriers. And so I'm just wondering why NMDOT was the agency selected to incorporate this potential function that now exists within our agency. I don't think it's a good fit myself. And I know this is, as Commissioner Fishman said, the intention of certainly the Senate leadership to strip out all functions from the Public Regulation Commission with the exception of utility regulation. They attempted to remove pipeline safety, but of course, we've got an MOU with the feds to inspect, as I understand, interstate pipelines. And so that was a bit more complex and not as easy just to strip it out without any other consequences. And so I see this as a very similar attempt that it just doesn't seem very well thought out. And I just think that there should have been more of an explanation in this FIR regarding the analysis of moving this function into the state motor carriers that's within Department of Public Safety. That's really only my only comment. And I think that, just stripping down the agency's functions, I mean, I would like to know what the long-term strategy is behind that. It can't be because we have a smaller office and we need to adjust the number of staff that the office building can accommodate. So I guess, Wayne and my colleagues on the commission, it'd be good to at least find out what the intention is for this. I mean, it was only back in 1996 when we were all asked as voters, I think it was 96, on a constitutional amendment to consolidate all the regulatory functions. And that's when the new PRC was born. And I'm sorry, 1996 was not that far away. And now we see this pendulum swinging in the opposite direction. And the most latest change was significant, right? I mean, no more elected commissioners. But I think what the general public didn't know at the time they voted on this last constitutional amendment to change the commission from elected to appointed was that our authority is being stripped out of the state constitution. I think that's significant. So I just wish, and I think the general public deserve to know what the strategy is. Why is this pendulum swinging in the opposite direction? And why are we doing the opposite of what was done back in 1996 when all those functions were consolidated? And for those of you who know the history, they've removed the regulation of insurance. They removed the regulation of corporations. They removed the state fire marshal's office, and that was probably a logical change. So I need to know context, but looking at this, this proposed bill, I question it in that they're moving this function to an agency. I don't think that's a good fit. That's all I had. So obviously, Wayne, we don't have consensus. Some oppose it, some are neutral. I hope that's enough. If it happens to get out of, the Senate Committee of Committees and it's deemed germane, I don't think it is germane. But, I sit in the cheap seats when it comes to state legislation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That is sufficient. And just, as you know, I can probably tell I try to be cautious in my predictions. And literally, as I was explaining that this bill and Senate Bill 147 were in the Senate Committees Committee, I got an update from Elizabeth saying that Senate Bill 198 has gotten a message from the governor. So again, doesn't mean it will pass this session, but it has been apparently ruled germane.
All right, any other comments on SB 198? All right, let's move on. Wayne, I noticed that there was a propane bill sponsored by, I think it was Senator Leo Jaramillo, and it was in direct response to the issue that we had with respect to the availability of propane in northern Rio County. And I think the bill seeks to change the law to make these propane contracts more versatile, where a customer of a certain propane company can obtain propane from a different company if the contract company is unable to deliver the propane. So we don't regulate propane companies. Regulation and licensing does on a very limited basis. But if you have any opportunity to advocate for that, I think you should, just based on the very recent experience we had several months ago with many people in northern Rio County, the elderly, going without propane. And then of course, their hands were tied in seeking propane from other resources.
Mr. Chairman, I am aware of that piece of legislation. It has passed the Senate. I don't know where it is on the House side, but I have seen a hearing on, at least one of the hearings on that bill. And I did see the Senate floor debate on that bill as well. It received significant bipartisan support, if I remember correctly. And you probably don't want me to say this, Mr. Chairman, but I think you deserve credit for that bill. You were the genesis. You were one of the first people in the state who said, hey, we've got a problem up there and it needs to be addressed, and reached out to the Attorney General's office to get their office involved. And now this legislation comes along, and I think people realize now that this was a big deal, and it really put people's health and safety at risk. So I'll check on that bill, Mr. Chairman, and let you know where it is. And absolutely, I'd be happy to put in a word if asked for that piece of legislation.
Thank you, Wayne. So there are additional bills listed there. And I'm going to ask all of the commissioners if there's any desire to revisit any of those bills that we have already discussed. Any desire to revisit any additional bills listed there on the agenda? Okay, let's move on to communications with the Chief of Staff. Wayne.
Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, just a couple of items. Like you, I know all of us have been very happy to see Mike Smith back on today's meeting and welcome him back, but also share concerns about the workload in the Office of General Counsel. Just want to give you a brief update. Of course, we got some really good news last week that Hans has decided to stay. I think he made the right decision, and I hope over the years he'll agree with that. But in addition to Hans staying, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, I did sign this morning a short-term contract to bring another attorney on to help out in the Office of General Counsel. That contract will run through the end of March, but we've already set money aside for the rest of this fiscal year to continue that contract if the commission and OGC thinks it's a benefit. And if that contract needs to run into the new fiscal year, we will have sufficient resources to continue with that. So just want to let you know that we are cognizant of the resource constraints, to use that word, in OGC, and are trying to make sure that we do what we can administratively to help them out through this period. And with that, Mr. Chairman, happy to answer any questions you have or discuss any other matters.
All right, thank you, Wayne. Any questions for Wayne? Any questions for Wayne? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you, Wayne. Let's move on to communications with General Counsel.
Mr. Chairman, I incorporate by reference everything that Wayne just said, and I appreciate his efforts to help us. I don't think we have no other communications from General Counsel.
Okay, commissioners, any comments for Office of General Counsel? All right, let's move on to communications with commissioners. Any commissioners wish to make any comments? All right. As you know, we deferred action on the work plan. I hope to have a more detailed work plan for action next week. Certainly you received, I think, one version of it, and Christopher Hall, my assistant, said he hadn't received any feedback. So if any commissioners have any ideas, let me know. And I think Commissioner Hall, you had recommended that we add one, and now I can't recall what it was. Do you recall?
Yes. Oh, I think it was along the lines of what sort of communications could be made to consumers to be mindful of electricity consumption, much in the same way we consume water. We just have to be mindful about it. Understand that, at least temporarily, during the pandemic and supply chain problems, resource adequacy tightness currently that we're faced with in the West, that until we implement further in the Energy Transition Act, we need to have people be mindful about the electricity they use.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hall.
Yeah.
Any other final comments?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Fishman.
Yeah, I realized that somehow I skipped over and didn't read the updated version of the work plan. My bad. Is decoupling still on there?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Have you gotten any further information talking with Anthony on his observations from his RD? On whether it makes sense to do rulemaking at this point?
Commissioner Fishman, you and I have been in contact about this. I have not spoken to Anthony yet, so I can speak to him right away about that.
Okay, because we did talk about this, Russell, and I'm looking at that, and based on the RD, it's really uncertain that we need to wait for a few things to happen before we can go forward with that and not be spinning our wheels. So, Russell, if you can get us some more commentary on that, that would be helpful.
Okay, will do.
I guess I had one issue that, and I don't know if it's in order next week, but much has been made about the status of the P&M case to abandon, well, to approve replacement power with respect to the abandonment of the Palo Verde leases. And well, let me just ask General Counsel, what is the status of that case, and what are the associated delays? Can you at least give us a general status of that?
I'm afraid, Mr. Chairman, I have no awareness of where that case stands.
Commissioner Maestas, I think I can add a very little amount, which is that, P&M has appealed that decision, and they filed their statement of issues on January 21st. There's a schedule. It was assigned to the general calendar assignment, which means
Judy,
that
excuse me, Judy, I was referring to the Palo Verde leases, the abandonment of
the Palo Verde leases. You weren't.
This is,
okay.
hi, this is Michael Smith.
Mike will probably be able to add something about the Palo Verde leases.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to let you know the case that's addressing the replacement resources. I intend to have the RD is going to be coming out shortly, and I intend to have a proposed order relating to the exceptions period on the commission's agenda next week.
So, Mike, just to be clear, we're not sitting on this case. We're still awaiting the recommended decision from the hearing examiner.
That's correct. The RD has not been issued yet. There is a time limit that we have to deal with.
So was that case bifurcated? I don't recall. Was it separate from the abandonment and the replacement power, or was it one case?
Yes, no, it was 21-215 was bifurcated from the original proceeding, which was case 21-00083. And in 2183, the commission adopted that portion of the recommended decision that addressed whether abandonment was required, and adopted the hearing examiner's recommendation that an abandonment approval is not required based on the fact that the leases that were originally approved contemplated the termination of those leases as of the dates that were basically incorporated in those leases.
Well, Mike, I'd ask you to expedite that case wherever possible. I know we're bound by, statutory timeframes and rules and procedures that dictate the timing and the adjudication of these cases, but please expedite where possible, because as PNM has clearly stated, until that particular case is adjudicated, they can include that replacement power in their load and resource table. And if you looked at the latest one, it is excluded from that. So that would certainly help the reserve margin going forward. Okay, anything else? Any other final shots at General Counsel? Just kidding. All right, then we are adjourned. Thank you all. Adios.
Thank you. Bye.